everyone. Welcome to the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast. And you're here. If you are here and you've been following our entire summer series, I'm so proud. If you've gotten here and this is your first time ever on this podcast, or maybe it's your first time in this specific series, this is not going to make any sense to you. So I just want to say that from the very beginning. Um, I want you to keep on listening. I do, but you could either go back a couple episodes where we start talking about interactive appreciation for the first time, or you could go back to the very beginning of the series. So I always like to when you start listening to a podcast and you're like, this is so weird. And then they go, oh yeah, well, actually we talked about this back in week blah, blah. And you're just like, I just wasted like minutes of my life here. So I don't want to do that to you. So if that's you, I just wanted to start out with that. And if it's not you and you aren't in the right place, welcome back to the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast. And you know by now, this place is a safe place for anyone that's struggling with isolation and overwhelm in a community setting. Regardless what it is that God has called you to do, it is not a mistake that you are where you are, but we want to come alongside. I want to help you learn how to experience really deep transformational community unlike anything else you've ever experienced before. And out of that, build other communities of practice around you where you can be seen, soothed, safe, and secure, and where you can step out and thrive fully in your calling. With that being said, we are on our last week of this amazing series that we've had focusing on Emmanuel journaling and interactive appreciation. And both of these practices that we've talked about, I do on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis, with my groups. They are amazing. They have totally transformed so many different lives. That's why we've done this summer for you. Also, you'll notice that each of these include the element of God working in part of our lives and us being aware of what He is doing and how He is moving. And so, in doing this, this might be the first time that some people have ever encountered these kind of practices. So, this is a frequently asked question episode, and there's two main questions that apply to both Emmanuel journaling and interactive appreciation that keep on coming up, regardless of the group, regardless of where I introduce these practices to. The first frequently asked question is, Bethany, what do I do is if I or somebody I'm leading cannot connect and cannot think of? That's the really cool phrase there, just to notice when they say think of. But when I cannot think of an appreciation memory, well, first of all, you don't have to think. If you go back to, I think it was our second podcast here in the series, maybe the third, when we talked about levels of the brain, you're familiar of when I'm trying to fix, when I'm trying to think, when I'm trying to make something happen, where are you at? You are in your amygdala. You're trying to figure it out. We don't want to be in the amygdala during this thing. We want to be at least in the upper half of our brain, if not the frontal lobe. That would be amazing. We want people to feel connected and seen and safe and secure, and to really have that constant flow of joy, the real good connections that they can have. So if they're trying to think and make something happen, or to get it right, or to fix it, they are not in that place of their brain. So one thing I do is I lead them to some deep breathing. I lead them to some deep breathing, allow them to calm down their brain. And depending on where they're at and their awareness of God, I ask them, sometimes I say, go ahead and get a posture of receiving, whatever that looks like. Whether you want to hold out your hands, whether you want to get in a comfortable position, knowing this isn't something that you have to get right. I'm going to take the pressure off, especially if it's the first time. We don't know what we're doing, right? So we're just take it as more of an experiment. And as you're sitting there and you take a deep breath, and I want you to just imagine Jesus with you. And as He's sitting there by your side, where does your mind go? What story does He want to remind you where He got to be with you? And just let them go there. Sometimes it can even be during the deep breathing that they already connect with something. They just allow themselves to calm down and allow themselves to do that. If they still can't find an appreciation moment, and this has happened especially For my clients or those that are really going through some trauma right here in the moment, I've had it personally in my life. And I've had moments where I've had to do this where I'm like, my brain is not getting out of the amygdala. I need to have an appreciation moment and not just to feel better, but to really just calm myself down and really experience God's love. I want to be able to do that. And how many times have you heard that from people? Like, I've not experienced God. Like, I've read the Bible and I can't experience Him. I can't feel Him close to me. I think we hear that a lot, right? What if we could give them the gift of seeing God in their here and now? So one thing you can do is I depends on what it is. Hopefully the person's not fasting because if this that does not work. Or two different ways. One, and I've done this with my kids too, is I'll give them a piece of chocolate or I'll give them a mint, or I'll give them just something that takes a little bit while to dissolve. Not like a chip, because I mean, you can, but it's harder to have that moment where you're actually being still and being aware. And so we both get it because you want to do it with them. Both get one, and we say, okay, we're going to take our time and just enjoy this moment. And I'm like, yeah, I want it. Let's go. And so you'll pop it in your mouth, and it's kind of hard as you're leading it. You go, wow, like what is happening right now in your mouth? If you could just pay attention to what's happening inside your mouth right now, to the flavors that you're noticing. Is that there might even be a memory that comes up, but you can stay present here right in this moment and just pay attention to the way it's making you feel inside. Pay attention if your muscles are relaxing or maybe they're getting tight with excitement. Pay attention if you want to really just chomp into it or if you really are savoring the moment that's easy or hard for you. Just be aware of what's happening right now. See what we did there? So we've actually guided them through an appreciation moment. What do you see in this moment? What are you hearing in this moment? Let the smell come in your nostrils. You're really focusing on the mouth because it's so right there. The first, point of contact there. And then what are you doing in your muscles? How is your muscles feeling? So you're actually leading them through. They don't know it at the moment, but you're actually leading them through an appreciation moment. So that's a way of doing it, but you could also do the same thing with a picture. You can have them either create or start to create a favorites album on their phone. So easy, right? Because even if they have old pictures that they want to go back, they can take a snap picture of it and they can put it into that album. You can teach people how to do that. You really can. And so if they're reaching a blank, it's really easy to pull out your favorites and go through one. And when you notice something hits you in a powerful way or a deep way or a curious way, stop there, really take a moment and look at that photo and go back in your mind to what God was doing in that moment. That can help you out too. So there's always ways to get around that. But again, it's usually when somebody's processing something in that day. And I haven't taught you other techniques where you can allow them to just kind of cast all that off to the side and be cared for in that moment. That is probably the best way of doing it, but I haven't taught you guys that yet, and I'm not going to try to cover that on the podcast. So these are some really easy, applicable ways to stay within the appreciation moment that you can help that person connect. Now, when you go, it's like, I can't feel God. I've actually had in some of my groups question that I've gotten and from pastors, from missionaries, from leaders, from counselors, from moms, from dads. I mean, I've heard this so many times, and it just amazes me. Um, and so don't be surprised. And this could be you too that's watching, and you're going, "That's me." And so the question I get is, Bethany, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to listen to God. I don't know what His voice sounds like. Like, how do I know that's Him and not myself? Really good question, right? And I'm sure you've gotten that, and you might have even thought that yourself, right? I guess I've just taken for granted ever since I was little. God would just speak to me through just the most amazing things. Like, I'd be listening to, no kidding, a Backstreet Boy song, right, in my car, and God would speak to me. He's like, "Hey, the love that it's talking about? I love you more than that." I just like, and I knew it was God. You know what I'm saying? We would get into like little small even disagreements where he would tell me something. I'm like, that's not true, knowing that it is true, but just not feeling it, you know? And so I guess I've gotten really good not even knowing how to even explain it. until until some of my practices with Luke 10, also oh goodness, Kurt Thompson and the Center for Being Known. Those two have really helped me, and it keeps on coming up. So it's a really easy way of explaining it. It's called Sift B. So before you start listening, just strip away everything from your mind. What God can sound like, be like. Take Just give yourself permission to just go into that blank space, which is hard for some people. And then, with that being said, as you're coming to your appreciation moment, you're bringing that up. SIFT B stands for sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And you can actually Google this. SIFT B is a psychological term, and I'll just let you go off. I could do a whole episode on that, but we're not going to go there right now. This is an easy way of explaining how to listen. So as you're listening, and as that moment comes up, what sensations are you noticing? And it could be a different sensation that you felt before even beginning. And so even that moment as you're, eating chocolate and you notice, wait a second, something different is happening in my body. Just be aware of that. Something else is happening that you're being aware of that God's doing. Just be aware of it. And another rule that I have is as you're doing the sifting, is that a new thing? Anyway, as you're sifting and being, you can just write down or take note of all the things. You don't have to share any of this. It's just between you and God. I've done this before where people feel so uncomfortable sharing that they keep it between them and God, and then maybe come back the next week and go, hey, after I sat with this a little bit, I'm feeling validated. Or somebody else can start sharing and they're going, okay, now I feel safe to share some of this. So keep that in mind too. They don't have to share any of it. Okay. So what sensations did I notice change? What images? They can be an image that just popped in your mind out of nowhere and you're like, where did that come from? Write it down. Just be curious about it. Stick with what it is. Feelings. Okay, this can be a tough one, especially if we're beginning to notice what feelings are and how they feel in our body. But if all of a sudden you're just starting like just really sad, and all of a sudden you bring up a moment, an appreciation moment, and you just start smiling out of nowhere. Like, okay, obviously it's that moment, but just be aware, like that shifted. That shifted. This one, okay, I'm noticing there's a feeling change here. Thoughts, just being aware of if you're going along and if your brain, so many different people process in so many different ways. Okay. And I do have some ADD tendencies. And so it's like squirrel, but there's some stuff that come in my mind that it's just like, wait, that's even bigger than a squirrel. That's like totally off. Like I can't even connect that to anything. And if I can't connect it to anything, it has to be off. And so I just get curious with that. And again, I'm not sharing it. I'm just getting curious with that and going, God, is that you? That's you? Can you confirm it? Can you show me more? So sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, and then behaviors is a big one. And that's been very recently been added, meaning you could notice that you want to do something different. All of a sudden you could be an appreciation moment. This happened in one of my groups. There was one person with experiencing an appreciation moment, and she actually, off camera, she told us about it later. She actually got on her knees and she followed that behavior because she's like, wow, this is so amazing. I just need to get on my knees and just be. So it could be a feeling of like, I want to, like, you're thinking about an appreciation moment where you're running after an ice cream truck and you just notice like your legs want to go, that you're just so in that. And there's joy in that moment. Again, you're not trying to fix, you're not trying to solve, you're not trying to psychoanalyze yourself. You're just being. You're just allowing yourself to be curious. You're allowing yourself to stay in that moment with what God is already doing. And so when you go to that last round where you share, regardless if it's Jesus speaking to you in the Emmanuel journaling or whether it's you sharing with other people, it's still, you know what? When Jesus is speaking to you, he can confirm all of that. And I just want you to feel free to hear. You can go and bounce that against scripture. You can also take somebody that you know that knows God very well in your life and show that to them and say, that you trust, could also be practicing this. That would help to really show them that next to them and say, Is this something? Or you could share this in a group. That's what's so good about when we practice this in our groups here. A lot of people get validation that they've never had or experienced any other time in their life because they're with similar people that are practicing the same things. They're willing to go deep, they're willing to wrestle, they're willing to get uncomfortable because they're wanting to do that together. So that's huge. So hopefully that helps a little bit in this, is that, if somebody says they can't come up with an appreciation moment, you got some ideas that can help them do that. And if they say they can't, like they've never heard from God, they don't know how to hear from God, you have some examples too. The one thing I'm going to mention in here too, that not associated with SIFB, is a lot of times you can just start out with reading scripture. You can make a whole appreciation moment just based off of scripture. You read Psalms 23. Oh my goodness. There's an appreciation moment there. There's some Emmanuel journaling in there. Put yourself into Psalms 23 and let his word wash over you. And what sensations, what images, what feelings, what thoughts, what behaviors come out of that. It's huge. And again, that helps people hear from God because you're using his word. And so, I've seen it done in so many different ways. I'm going to stop there because everything in me could talk forever about this. But hopefully that gets some of these questions answered. And again, we love to connect with you. We have a community, and after this week, if you're catching this on a replay, I'm sorry. These resources should still be there, part of that main free tier community. But every podcast that comes out with Step Out and Thrive, there's a thread with the link to the podcast, but also, hey, you can discuss, you can connect, you can make new connections, you can share what you're thinking about this podcast episode. You can link to other resources. I mean, there's so many different things that happen as a result of these podcast episodes, because I want you guys to have a safe place to connect. I want you to have a safe place to come back and say, well, I tried this, or I didn't try this, or, does anybody have any resources for this? I mean, whatever it is, I want you to be able to do that. And that's free. No charge. That's free. And so I want you to be able to connect. There's also higher tiers for those that want to practice in real life, in person, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's face to face. Those are at a higher tiers. But again, you cannot offer what you yourself have not experienced. Experience. Allow yourself to experience and be. And you just be amazed because God will transform your life so that you can, out of that, help others experience that as well. So that being said, thank you so much for being part of this series. Would love to see you in the community. You can visit my splash page, bethanyboring.com, for the direct links to the community, as well as all the other links that are out there. They change frequently, but the link to the community is definitely on there. So if you have any questions, you can reach out. It's Bethany at stepoutandthrive.com. And really have enjoyed having you along this journey with me. I hope you had an amazing summer, and I'll see you back next week. And remember, dare to do more than just survive, step out and thrive. Have a great week, guys. Bye.